The more I am playing the boomer shooter genre, the more I am getting to appreciate it. Not only because of how many of these enjoy high-octane combat, but how because no matter which game I am playing, the experience always keeps itself fresh. Going from sci-fi, fantasy, and the flavor of today's review, horror. Dusk is a very special game among the boomer shooter genre, arguably for being one of the games that kickstarted the modern wave of boomer shooters we are enjoying today since Brutal Doom. In terms of being a spiritual successor, I guess you could say Dusk's horror takes right after Blood. But having played Blood, I believe Dusk ends up being the better game. Now, I was originally planning to play the game last year, but one little detail made me wait until now. The game was remastered in HD, replacing its retro graphics for a more stylized look, one that I honestly fell in love with. But before we go in any further, let's go ahead and cover the basics. In Dusk, we play as the Dusk Dude, or as the enemies call him, the Intruder, a treasure hunter coming home to the titular town of Dusk, Pennsylvania, only to find out he has been taken over by a demonic cult that has killed his family. Now, with nothing left to lose, the Intruder makes his way deeper into the town, to wage a one-man war against the cult, and avenge his family. And that's all I could gather from the flavored text in-game and browsing the wiki. Because true to the genre, this is all just flavor. The real meat of this game is of course in the gameplay. I think the best way to start talking about it is by mentioning if this game manages to overcome what I call the trappings of the genre, namely the problem I have with starting pistols. I mentioned this in other videos, but it always bothers me when the starting pistol always feels weak and useless, barely enough to defend yourself and one that you can quickly ignore once you start getting better guns in your arsenal, often leading you to trading needless damage with enemies. Dusk pistols sadly are quite weak, but the movement system and the horror aspect of the game turns them into your best friend for ammo conservation. If you run empty with some of your better guns, you can use the pistols and your dodging skills to keep enemies at bay until you run into much needed supplies. Better yet, you can actually focus on unloading your pistols for crowd control, so you can then switch to the better stuff and truly start to tear into the enemy, having thinned their numbers. It's a small detail to get caught up on, I know, but it is a testament to the quality of the combat, making me feel like I should play smart rather than just spamming fire until I win. And playing smart is indeed something you want to do, because enemies in this game can take a lot of punishment before finally going down. Not enough to feel bullet spongy, but enough that you can't afford to sit in one place firing and hoping for the best. So what you find yourself doing is dodging any and all damage coming your way, while having to choose wisely which weapon to use so you can paint the arena with the blood of your enemies. This is why I say the pistols are good for ammo conservation and are also a great last resort. Enough to keep you alive while you look for ammo, but not enough to win a level, since it does the least damage. It means you are going to burn through that ammo really fast, so you want to make that defense count. Usually I would consider something like this to be a negative since you want to feel powerful in an FPS, but in the case of this game, having tough enemies in spite of being a one-man army plays right into the core of theme of Dusk, horror. You may be wondering, how will the horror in Dusk work if your protagonist is loaded with guns that you can tear into with them? The answer is simple, with quiet time and dread. Pacing is always key in games like this. For all the times you spend having intense gunfights, you need similar time to slow down and digest what you've been through, even replenish some of your ammo and health. This is where the creepy style and tone of the game get to shine. After clearing up an intense battle and feeling good about yourself, the game will sometimes throw a curve at you. Your flashlight will become damaged, and you will have to stumble in the dark to find a replacement. Despite still carrying your arsenal, you start to feel powerless. Helpless even. Sometimes using the muzzle flash of your guns to give yourself a brief blink of light to guide yourself, then realize you are not alone. These are brief sections and you can count them with one hand, but they really shake things up enough to remind you how vulnerable you are and how danger lurks everywhere. Because even with your flashlight, you can come across an area where all the enemies are already dead. No music, no context, just silence. Then make your way down through the facility, you begin moving slowly and with caution, get to a dead end, when suddenly, you are introduced to the Wendigos. Invisible enemies who only show up if you manage to shoot them and can stalk you and chip away at your health if you're not careful. That is how you do a great scare. Even better, they become regular enemies after that, so now you get an extra layer of danger to look out for, and I love it. Because the true core of horror, what makes it take, is not so much the scares themselves, but rather the dread and fear of the unknown, and not knowing where the Wendigos are while you're dodging them in fire legit gives you that fun sense of dread. With that being said, however, there's two things I don't like about shooters: bullet sponges and trading damage. I'll elaborate. Bullet sponges don't need much explanation. Taking too many shots to kill an enemy makes the guns feel weak and the combat tedious. And trading damage is something that happens in older games, when the shooting is mostly hitscan based, so no matter what you try, you can't kill enemies without taking damage yourself. It starts to turn the experience into a slog. After thinking it over and playing the game some more after my first playthrough, I come to the conclusion I am actually okay with the enemies taking a lot of punishment before dying in this game, mainly thanks to how they are balanced. They eat just enough ammo to feel threatening, but also go down fast enough to feel your weapons really did make a difference. Better yet, the combat arenas are big, and the intruder moves fast enough that dodging enemy damage is very doable if you are good enough at it. It is a genuine gameplay challenge, even on normal difficulty. That means you don't need to know which guns to use and when to use them. It's a much better feeling to see that I took damage or died because of my own mistakes, rather than because the game decided I'm going to take damage just because I'm on the enemy's line of sight. Without much negatives to speak of this game, what else can I praise? The level design, of course. I mentioned environmental storytelling, the horror themes, and so on. All of this gets complemented with a very cohesive level design that also plays up the horror in a different way. The early chapters of the game are your standard countryside town ravaged by evil. You can see this place having been lived in at some point before the cold came along and caused it to rot. You then get to see a city, an industrial zone, and the deeper you get to uncover the evil plans of the cult to bring about a cosmic horror into our world, the more reality itself begins to warp. It's surreal and it messes with you really good if you think about it for a moment. I love it. Complement all of this with great bosses and we get a semi-perfect experience, because the best boss fights in a video game are those that actually serve as a test of the skills you have learned up to that point. It's not enough to just unload all your arsenal on them and hope for the best. You have to dodge, slide, you have to use cover, you have to know when to shoot and when to move, and then feel satisfied after coming up victorious. All in all, I think Dusk is a nearly perfect experience. I can see why it helped kickstart the current age boomer shooters we've been loving and enjoying. It accomplishes all it sets out to do, and it manages to be a fun roller coaster from beginning to end. I will say, if you are like me among the few who haven't played this game before, give it a go. It's well worth it. It's a bit on the longer side if you take time to explore the levels and find your way around blindly, but to be honest, that is part of the fun. Despite what many are saying over the years about how they got less time to play games as they get older and thus don't focus on one game at a time, I am finding it a lot easier to just pick something and play. Because by the end of the day, you will get through most of your backlog. All you have to do is sit down and have a grand old time, and if it turns out anything like my own experience, there is a good chance you will come across a wealth of priceless gems.